Speaker, I do believe that New Zealanders will make a positive, progressive choice at this year's general election, and I think that that will result in this national government being turfed out. Because I think New Zealanders have had enough of this arrogant government telling them how good they've got it when they're watching their wages go backwards, when they're watching future generations being shut out of the housing market, when they're watching the education system and the health system being run down under this national government. I think New Zealanders are ready to make a positive, progressive change at this year's election, and I think that that will see the election of a Labour-led government. Because we are seeing under this government, while National tells everybody how good their lives are, wages have stagnated. New Zealanders are not getting ahead under National. In fact, wages are barely keeping pace with inflation. While the people look across at Australia and they see the Australian workers getting paid more, and this government, John Key stood in Westpac Stadium a few years ago and decried the exodus to Australia, and yet has done nothing to address that. Unemployment doubled under this national government, and remains disgracefully high in this country. And Bill English and John Key go around and say how getting unemployment down is a hoax and it will never happen. That's National's vision. They don't care that unemployment is high. They don't care the fact that we have literally 147,000 unemployed people in New Zealand. John Key and Bill English say doing something about that is unrealistic. Well, we in the Labour Party have a more positive attitude than that. Our attitude says that every New Zealander who can get out there and work should have the opportunity to do so. And that means they should have a job they can go to, and it shouldn't just be any old job, it should be a well-paid job as well. It should be with a living wage where they can be well supported, where they can support their families, and that is the aspiration of this government. The aspiration of that government is all about making sure the people at the top of the economic pile are well looked after, and they have completely shut out any concerns being raised by those who are struggling to make ends meet. We in the Labour Party simply don't think that's acceptable. We will make sure that all New Zealanders get their fair share of the recovery. Mr. Speaker, when future generations of New Zealanders, the generation who will vote for the first time at this year's election, go to the polls, they will be asking themselves what kind of country do they want to inherit from the current generation of political leadership? Do they want to inherit a country in which they have no prospect of buying their own home? Do they want to inherit a country where they are bound to end, or large numbers of them will end lower wages here in New Zealand than if they moved overseas and moved offshore? Do they want to inherit a country where all of the valuable assets have been sold off by the government and nothing is left for future generations? And I think that they will decide that is not the type of country they want to inherit, and they will vote for a positive, progressive change at this year's general election. I want to talk particularly about the education system, because if there is one sector that needs a positive, inspirational vision at the moment, it is the education system. And in the education system at the moment, we've got a government that is obsessed with narrowing down the focus of the whole system onto a few measurable targets that don't bring out the best in every child, that don't place high trust in the teaching profession, that tell schools and teachers they're not to be trusted, they're to be treated as factories, and they're to be measured on their outputs as if kids were units of economic production rather than the unique individuals that they actually are. They've implemented, or they want to implement, this new policy of expert teachers and executive principals that will take the really good teachers out of the classroom, that will take the really good principals away from the schools that they are currently working in. I used an example at question time today of a school principal who said, how on earth am I supposed to continue to manage my own school? How on earth am I supposed to continue to manage my own school and oversee 10 others at the same time? It's simply not feasible. The teaching profession are saying this isn't feasible, it's not workable, and this government are too arrogant to listen to that, and they are going to plough ahead. And Hekia Parata, when she was interviewed about this on the television a couple of weeks ago, refused to rule out legislating for this change to take place. So even when the entire teaching profession puts their hand up and says we've got concerns about this, we've got concerns about the workability of this, the government won't listen. They will say we will railroad over top of the feedback from the profession, the feedback of the experts in the classroom, and we will say thou shalt do this, and they will legislate it. But that, of course, is not surprising from this government, because this government don't even trust the teaching profession enough to have a say in how their own profession is governed. They are proposing legislation through this parliament that will mean that the teaching profession have no say over who forms the board of their own regulatory body. We would never do that to lawyers or to doctors or to nurses or to any other profession. In fact, I've got speeches, and I've quoted them in the House before, of the National Party decrying the real estate industry's lack of influence over their own governing and regulatory body. And yet they were willing to stand up in the House and defend the real estate agents, but when it comes to the teaching profession, no, nothing. They're quite happy to ride roughshod over the profession and say that they are the teaching profession and say they are not to be trusted. I think that's wrong. I think we should trust the teaching profession. I don't think there is a single teacher in this country that goes into the classroom every day and thinks, gosh, I'm really aiming to do a bad job today. Every teacher who goes to school does so because they want to make the future better for future generations of New Zealanders, and I congratulate them for that. And I say that on behalf of the Labour Party, we trust in the teaching profession and we respect the teaching profession, and in our case it's not hollow sentiment. We actually believe it, and it will be absolutely evident in the policies that we will be promoting. We have a government here who want to remove the requirement for registered and qualified teachers in charter schools. They don't want these schools to be accountable to the same accountability mechanisms as every other school in the country. They don't even have to teach to the curriculum in the way that every other school in the country does. And they are willing to shovel millions, tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money into charter schools with very little accountability, even to the point where if someone establishes a charter school, gets millions of dollars of government funding and then closes before the end of their supposed contract, there's no ability to recoup that money. There is not a single clause in that contract that allows the government, the Crown, to recoup that cost. So these schools can go and splash cash buying huge assets, and the government don't have a leg to stand on if one of those schools were to close, and that is simply wrong. We've got the government here, their solution to student achievement is to introduce national standards, which are neither national nor standard. They are no measure of benchmarking student performance because the way they are assessed at schools varies dramatically, and there are no basis of comparison whatsoever. And now they're talking about using them as the precursor for performance pay and for making school funding decisions based on national standards results. Well, most teachers in the country would be pretty happy just to be paid on time their current pay, let alone performance pay. At the moment, some of them are struggling to be paid at all because of the absolute debacle that is the NovaPay payroll system that nearly 2 years after it was implemented still doesn't work. We've still got people struggling with historical problems not being paid because of the disaster that is NovaPay. And Mr Fix-It has quickly morphed into Mr Excuses because he hasn't got any answers to the NovaPay problem other than to pretend that nothing's wrong anymore. It's all been fixed, according to Stephen Joyce, and yet there is feedback on a daily basis from within schools that teachers still aren't being paid on time, they're still struggling, they're still being distracted from the valuable work that they have to do in teaching the future generations of kids. It's time to fix the NovaPay problem. Mr Speaker, there is a better way in the education system. It starts with quality early childhood education and runs right the way through the whole system. The Labour Party is committed to quality early childhood education, to funding centres that have 100% qualified staff for those qualified teachers, making sure that kids get access, no matter where they live, to quality early childhood education. It means recognising that we've got a huge diversity of students in our education system, from those who have special learning needs and who are falling behind to those who have special learning needs because they are well ahead. And we want to make sure, it was Gifted and Talented Week last week, and we want to make sure that all of those kids are supported so that they can achieve to their full potential. Because what this government don't get is underachievement isn't just about kids who are falling behind. Underachievement is any child that is not achieving to their full potential. They could be incredibly bright, well ahead of their peers, but if they are not achieving to their potential, then that is a waste as well, and they are underachieving as well. We have to support every student in our schools to make sure that they are achieving to their full potential, and that starts with a much higher trust in the teaching profession. We've got to set the teachers free, cut the red tape, allow them to get on with the job that they are there to do. They're passionate about teaching, they're passionate about future generations of New Zealanders. Let's let them get on with the job, let's put some trust in them, and let's stop bagging them in the way this government do.
I call Maggie Berry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, the opposition speeches in the House today